Right, so Austria 2021. Now, Red Bull Ring. Um, Temptation is to start off with the drama, but I'm gonna avoid that. Um, I'm gonna finish with that because probably, I'll say some stuff that a lot of people won't agree with or may, who knows. And I want to roll in what I say at the end with the sprint and qualifying. So I'll start off with the race results, but in kind of in reverse. I'm going to start with the people who I thought were nonsense. Sauber, Williams, and Aston Martin. They really are. They're proving to be worthless, literally. And I don't like saying that because I know how hard it is. In other words, people who are very good can be beaten by people who are super good and make the very good people not look not good. But you can't help but think that Stake is they're just going around in circles. Zoo, you can't help but think he's just becoming a regular paid driver where, because him bringing some Chinese sponsorship money there, he's there because he's really not doing anything. And he's a guy I like. I've actually defended him in the past. But I get the feeling that he's just lost the plot. And I think Bottas is just kind of on autopilot because I don't think the car is going anywhere. I think Aston Martin has, similar to last year, just gotten lost in their development cycle. Unlike last year where they started out well and went backward, this year they started out badly and are still going backward. So they're going even worse now. I think they'll end up frustrating Alonso, and Stroll just seems like he doesn't care. I really want when you look at him in interviews, you even wonder if is he on drugs or something? I mean, that sounds bad to say, but he just makes these strange kind of answers when he's asked questions. It's like he's just totally out of touch with reality. And you just have to wonder, is he really even interested in doing this, or is he just is his father just living vicariously through him and making him do it? Because I really just have to wonder if he's even interested in racing anymore. But suffice to say, Aston Martin is just wallowing around the back. Williams, I've said it before that I'm not convinced about Vols. I mean, obviously Sargent is a joke, so he's not gonna get them anywhere. But Albon is a good driver, and you hear a lot of talk about what is promised and what is to be delivered and all these plans, and you hear them talking about why Sainz should go there. All of the big F1 pundits are, oh yes, Williams is the best choice. Don't go to the factory teams. Go to Williams because Vols is there. I don't know. I don't see it. I might be proved wrong, but I just not seen it. And in fact, I hope that I am wrong because I actually think Williams is a great team. It's one of the traditional F1 teams. It's one of the teams I grew up watching and cheering for. And my personal hero, which is Senna, drove for them, even though it ended tragically. But the point is, it's a team that deserves success, but I just not seen it materializing, frankly, and I'm not sure if it's gonna materialize either in the medium, even in the medium term. All right, so that's kind of around the back of the grid. All right, now moving up a little bit now, and this is not really in order of finishing. This is just some general observations. Haas and Alpine did pretty decently. I mean, Haas, I think, got 2 cars in the points. Alpine with Gasly got in the points. That's a pretty decent improvement. I mean, in fact, Haas looked pretty decent yesterday in the sprint. So I would say overall, they've made progress. To what extent that is to do with the track, I'm not sure. But actually, both Haas and Alpine actually look a little bit better lately. I think under what's his name, Irowasa's leadership, the Japanese guy that's running the team, that took over from Steiner. They definitely seem to be making some progress. I mean, that's a good example of a contrast in what I was talking about with a Williams versus them. I actually see where progress is. Progress isn't just measured solely in success. if you look like you're doing something right, even if you're not succeeding, but you seem to be making steps in the right direction, I'll chalk that down to progress. And that's what I see at Haas. Yes, they'll have the odd race or so where they go backward, but in general, I see some progress there, right? Similarly at Alpine, I mean, maybe a little more inconsistent, but still progress. I thought Gasly drove quite well. I still think Ocon is a total asshole. I think he drove, he's still a nasty driver. But at the end of the day, I think Gasly did well and deserved his position. Moving up a little with V-Carb, kind of a one step forward, two step backward scenario. I mean, this time Danny Rick did better than Tsunoda. I think with this last round of what we'd call upgrades, Tsunoda doesn't seem to like them very much because he's in the last 2 or 3 races he's seemed to be struggling. So I don't think he likes what was done to the car. Ricardo did decently, but his problem I think is consistency. I mean, maybe because he's now, the word is that he's on the chopping block. I mean, Helmut Marko and some of the Red Bull people seem to be thinking that he's past his sell-by date now, and that his opportunity to prove himself has gone. No, we see maybe that's motivating him. I don't know if that's part of it. But he seems to have made a couple of steps. More power to him. I mean, it's a team I kind of like, and I'm hoping to see them progress. And I like Dan Eric as an individual, and I kind of hope he would do well. And I definitely like Yuki, and I definitely want to see him succeed. So I'm kind of, I'm hoping that things will work out for them. So in that mid pack has Alpine and V-Carb, I'd say I kind of see positive signs. Getting out to the sharp end of the grid, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull. Let's look at Mercedes first. Now, the last 3 or 4 races, Mercedes had a clear improvement. I mean, unquestionably. They're now very competitive with at least 3rd place. So I would say that either Ferrari has gone backward or Ferrari has stood still while Mercedes has advanced. So whereas Mercedes was 4th and probably sometimes 5th, now I'd say Mercedes has firmly grasped 2nd place. I don't mean in terms of points or anything like that. I'm talking about just in terms of on-track pace. I think they've gotten the measure of Ferrari so far. Whether this is just again, things going in waves. Or cycles. I don't know if this is just a down cycle for Ferrari as they get a handle on their upgrades or what. But whatever upgrade Mercedes did clearly worked better than whatever upgrade Ferrari did. And even though Sainz is not doing badly per se, I think Mercedes clearly is superior. Hamilton and Russell on any given race weekend is able to challenge and more often than not beat the Ferraris. And so that's a huge step for Mercedes, because when you think about where Mercedes has been for the past couple of years, that's very dramatic. I mean, it's not maybe to the same extent as say where McLaren was versus where they are now, because there was a time when McLaren was nowhere as recently as 2 years ago, and now McLaren is challenging for wins. And so that's a massive jump. Mercedes one isn't quite as dramatic, but it's certainly getting there. In other words, they've clearly understood what some of the issues are that they had. Perhaps now that they understand it, they realize maybe not everything can be corrected, because some of it might be baked into the design of the car and can't be corrected until next year. Possibly, I don't know. But certainly the improvements that they've made suggest that they at least understand what the problem is and are taking steps to address it. And that's a plus. Russell did very well today. Obviously he won, but that's somewhat by default. But the point is, you can't win if you weren't there to inherit the win, right? So that wouldn't have happened because Piastri could just as easily have won, Hamilton could just as easily have won, and Sainz could just as easily have won. So the same can be said for those guys. So the fact is, Russell made good passes. He had a good fight with Hamilton. He had a good fight with Sainz. You know, he did well, and he justified his place, and he was in position to capitalize on what happened with Verstappen and Norris. And he even said it, I think, at the beginning, that you know, boy, these two get together and I'll be ready to take the place. And so said, so done. So good on Mercedes, and we need that. I keep stressing, we need to see competitive racing, and for the past, I would say 5 or 6 races, we have certainly seen that. We've seen McLaren step up, we've seen Ferrari step up, we've seen Mercedes step up. At different times and with different consistencies, because as I said, Ferrari is Ferrari. I mean, if you know anything about their history, you'll know that they're masters at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But as a team. But suffice to say, they're still up there, and I think there will be events where they'll do better than what than others, right? So we now have a nice 4-way fight at the top. I still think Red Bull and McLaren have an edge over Mercedes and Ferrari, but it's a small edge, and it will vary from track to track. McLaren. I think McLaren's pace is clear. I think their tire, and I said this recently, that in terms of managing tires, McLaren has made a huge step. Their cars, if you look at consistently for the past few races, they are the strongest at the end of the race. Always. They're always very strong at the end of the race, suggesting that their tire management is first class. The chassis is unquestionably kind to its tires, and that plays into their favor in the later stages of the race. And I mean, the lap you want to be fastest in, the lap you want to be leading is always the last one. Right? So, you know, nothing's wrong with being fast towards the end of the race. So at the end of it, I give McLaren credit for that. I think their drivers are doing well. Piastri and Norris drove superbly. I think still Norris has the edge over Piastri, certainly in terms of outright pace. But Piastri is getting there. He's getting there. Piastri is doing well. I think his penalty was deserved. I mean, he made heavy weather of it, and the team was complaining about it. But when you look at the videos, the fact is he did go over the line. I mean, we can argue about the FIA and gravel traps and whatever, but the fact is he did go over the white line. That I don't think that's, you can't contest the fact he did go over the white line, and as such, he should get a penalty. I'm not sure why he thinks after. I can understand at the moment why he'd be upset, but after he looks back on the videos, I get the feeling that he's still unhappy about it. I don't get that, because the video clearly shows that he did go over the line. Not sure what's his issues there. And that guy Andrea Stella, I think he's a good team guy, but I think he's a little overly. I don't know if it's possible to be overly supportive of your driver, but I think he needs to take a little step back sometimes. Sometimes he makes these very harsh pronouncements about whether competitors are the FIA or the. He needs to chill a little. I think he gets a little carried away in how he defends his drivers. Norris is fast, very smooth, can win. But I think Norris is immature and impulsive and impatient. And I think that is hurting him a little bit. And is something that I think will improve. Because remember, he's not quite in the Piastri range in terms of inexperience. Obviously, Norris has been around for a while. But I would not say he's had a winning car for a while. So he's kind of learning how to deal with success. And so I'm prepared to give him a little leeway and let him develop. You know what I mean? Red Bull. So again, I said I'm going to leave the incident for last. I'm just looking now at team performance and car performance. a lot of people seem, myself included, thought that that Red Bull was struggling a bit in terms of finding pace. Well, I think this weekend showed that they too can bring upgrades. Granted, their upgrades won't necessarily be as dramatic, but they too can make a step. And you can never write them off as a team, as a car, as a driver combination, whatever. They clearly made a step. I mean, Verstappen was absolutely imperious. He was dominant in practice, in sprint qualifying, in the sprint itself, in race qualifying, everything. He was flying. And even in the race, I mean, at the end of the day, when he went into that last pit stop, he had about, I think, 7 seconds or 8 seconds almost lead. So there was no doubt that Red Bull responded somewhat in terms of the car and how Verstappen, is able to deal with upgrades and how to extract pace from the car, because he was untouchable over the weekend. And I'll go into that a little more shortly. Perez. In fact, we kind of reach now to the end of the team analysis. So in terms of overall teams and positions. So let's start looking now into some specifics now of this weekend. During practice and qualifying and in the sprint, Verstappen's dominance over Perez is incredible. I mean, he's dominant over his competitors as well, because the fact of the matter is that a 0.4 or 4/10 margin in qualifying for the race is almost unheard of in this time. I mean, if you think about it, we've had many races recently where a few tenths covers like 1st to 15th, right? Now we have 4/10 between 1st and 2nd. I mean, that's amazing, right? So again, I go back to Verstappen is supernatural around the steering wheel. I was looking at some data on Saturday, I think it was. Yeah, after I think it was before the sprint, but after the sprint qualifying. Yeah, I think it was after sprint qualifying. And not only is Verstappen faster, but it's how he's faster that's amazing. He is in 7th gear on sections of the track where other people are in 6th. Now, if you understand about driving and racing, that's no joke. Okay? That is a serious achievement. We're not talking about not being in the same gear, but being a few kilometers per hour faster than the next man. We're talking about you're in a different gear. So there was a point on the track, I think it was between corner 7 and 8. Yeah, between corner 7 and 8, where he was in 7th and the other 19 cars were in 6th. So in other words, he's literally the only driver, the one and only driver who is able to get the car up into 7th gear on that section. And as a result, he was like 9 or 10 kilometers per hour faster than anybody else through that section. And that's like a 2 or 3 corner high speed section. I mean, I don't care if you like him or dislike him. I don't care if you're a fan or not a fan. But if you like racing and you appreciate, bravery and skill, listen to me, man. That is serious driving this dude is doing. You can't fight it, right? He's wiping the floor with a man. Look at Perez. I keep making this point. Perez is not a bad driver. 2 or 3 years ago, Perez would have been a guy who any other team would have paid good money to get. That's a fact. Perez in another team would flourish. Perez was a very good driver. Perez came into Red Bull with a stellar reputation, right? Verstappen is like 3 or 4 tenths faster than Perez on used tires when Perez is on new. Now, that in qualifying, that's not supposed to happen. That That is literally almost impossible to achieve. How does he do that? Right? That is crazy. Just an amazing achievement. So for me, Red Bull made a big response then to the competition, having come under so much pressure for the past few races, and in my opinion, actually being second best quite often with McLaren. I actually think McLaren is a faster car in the past few races. Red Bull's response this race was admirable, and they just knocked it out of the park, right? For this race weekend, I should say. They clearly show that we can respond and we can also produce speed. Now, let's get into the actual incident with Norris and Verstappen. Now, let me state from the outset, the actual incident where they literally, the point at which they made contact, I'm going to blame Verstappen for that. It is his fault, in a sense where I think at the last instant, he twitched the car a little to the left. Now, to me, he's doing that because he wants to turn, he wants to open his line to get a better entry into the right-hander. But it doesn't really matter. The fact is, he did twitch to the left. And Norris was there and they made contact, right? So, for causing a collision, I'm going to have to say, yes, he was wrong. No question. But to make it seem as if it's this terrible thing and it's always supposed to crash stop and it's garbage. And this is where I'm going to say stuff that probably people won't like. 90% of the people saying that are just the Lewis Hamilton fans who are all Lando fans on a weekend where Lando is doing well. Because it's still born them say Verstappen beat Hamilton. That's a fact. I say that with no apology. Because on any other, I didn't hear any complaints from them when Norris literally tried to run Verstappen off of the road last week in Spain, when he literally just, pushed him off into the grass at high speed, at nearly, full tilt. Nobody said anything. That was fine, right? I have an issue with the hypocrisy. So, I am on record as saying I'm not really a Verstappen fan, and I probably won't ever be, because there's aspects of his personality that, frankly, that rub me the wrong way, right? But I am becoming a fan of him as a driver, as a racer. And this weekend hasn't changed my mind. Yes, it was a move that was questionable in terms of what caused the contact. But frankly, half of the moves that Norris had made immediately leading up to that on previous laps were questionable too. I thought Norris was extremely aggressive in terms of how he was braking, how he was pushing the nose of the car down there. He ran Verstappen off, I think, on one occasion at least previously. And Verstappen had to take avoiding action on at least one other one, I think 2 or 3 laps before, right? So Norris was in no way, shape, or form, like doing everything right. Now, and essentially Verstappen is becoming aggressive in his defending as well. So, yes, he is wrong by the rule. He hit Norris and he got a penalty. No argument there. But to somehow suggest that, this is just Verstappen being Verstappen and it's terrible and Norris did garbage. I don't accept that, and it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Right? Now, I'll also add another layer to that. To what extent did the FIA intervene in that accident? And I'll tell you why I said that. Norris violated track limits 4 times. He got his black and white flag. The engineer came on the radio and told him, and then he did it again. He got a penalty, which was he did actually receive the penalty before the end of the race. But the point is, had that been communicated at the time, I think 2 or 3 or maybe 4 laps passed before that was mentioned, would what happened still have happened? Would Verstappen's mindset have changed if he knew Norris was going to get a 5-second penalty? Would Norris's actions have changed if he knew he was going to get a 5-second penalty? We don't know, but the fact is, it makes you wonder if the FIA just figured that if they said anything, it would change the situation, and they wanted to see the fight. Because it's good, it's great for the fans. People like that. It's a spectacle. It makes you wonder if the FIA deliberately withheld that information till after the incident. Because I do wonder what would have happened if the fact that Norris had gotten a 5-second penalty prior to the incident, would it have changed? I don't know. The pit stop by Red Bull also was a disaster and clearly led to why they came together. that was 6.5 second pit stop. Very uncharacteristic of them. I think the left rear, the wheel nut jammed. No doubt about that is what brought them together, because I think when he pitted, he was like 7 or 8 seconds ahead. So a lot of different things combined to create this situation. And I mean, I want to again be clear. I blame Verstappen for the incident itself, but I don't think Norris is blameless, nor do I think Verstappen's actions were particularly malicious. As I said, I think he was just bringing the car a little wide to make the right-hander, not necessarily to block Norris. I also think that it could have been it was just a small hit. It wasn't a massive, like a crash impact. It was just a bounce. It's just that they happened to lose their tire at the time. So it looked much more dramatic than it really needed to be. But it really was a relatively insignificant incident. Had the tire had neither of them gotten a puncture, because at the time there was no bodywork damage. Is after the tires punctured and the rubber started flailing around, that all the damage took place. If they had just bounced wheels and then continued on, I'm not even sure if anything would have come out of it. But which is again one of the reasons why I have a challenge with how the stewarding is done. Because they often say it's about the offense and not the outcome. But I differ with that. I think the same thing that happened with Alonso and Russell, I think is the same thing happened here. I think they looked at the outcome rather than the incident. Having said that, I already acknowledge, I do think he was at fault. So if you're going to assess it as a penalty, it's deserved. He was wrong. Because technically under the rule, he was the one who made contact with Norris because of that little left jink. I think some of the other penalties were both good and bad. I think Hamilton's one was, well, again, it's a crossing of a white line and there are cameras that show it, so you can't argue with that. I think Alonso's penalty for hitting Albon absolutely deserved. He locked up and slid straight into Albon, and I'm a huge Alonso fan, but I readily admit he screwed up there. I didn't think that was a fair penalty. You can't argue with that. So overall, I think most of it was within reason, but I do question why, as I said, that 5 second for Norris wasn't mentioned earlier, despite it being known earlier. It's not like they were still debating. They knew that he had violated it 4 times and they made their decision, but they just didn't communicate it till after the fact. I have a challenge with that, and I have a challenge with that. That's kind of where I'm at with this. Good race. At the end, it was kind of boring at first because we thought Verstappen was just going to run away. But ultimately, it turned out to be pretty exciting. I'm glad George won. I'm not really a big fan of him, but I'm glad he was there to inherit it. I actually think he drove well enough that he deserved it. As much as I think Piastri came up through, the field and did well as well, I think Russell really drove well. He showed pace and he drove well. And if anybody else was gonna win, I don't mind it being him. I think I'm happy with the result as it is now. So on to the next race. Who are Vex? That's life. That's how I see it. I have to call it as I see it. All right.